Welcome. My name is Jessie Atencio, and I'm the Assistant Director in charge of Consultation and Training for the Arizona Division of Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Today we're going to be talking about the GHS system as it relates to the Hazard Communication Standard. The actual GHS system has been something that's been developed or in the develops within the federal OSHA area since the mid-2000s. And since then, with solicitation, information, response back from the public, employers, manufacturers, everything has been finalized and pushed through that we now have a global harmonization system within the hazard communication section of the standards. And for those of you that may not know, that is 1910-1200 is the area to look at. So what this presentation is going to give you is just a little bit of background information, what to expect, and also how to go over some of the new revisions with a little bit of questions and answers at the end. So for anybody that wants to visit ADOSH at either location, you can either visit us at the main office at 800 West Washington Street, Phoenix, Arizona, 85007, or the Tucson office, which is located at 2675 East Broadway Boulevard, Tucson, Arizona, and that's 85716. Our main number for consultation is 602-542-1769. Following this presentation, anybody that wishes to discuss this further can always give a call to our consultation and training department without any type of fear for making a complaint or anything like that. We stress to many employers and employees that when they contact the consultation side, and as long as it's not a complaint or any type of discrimination issue or a fatality or accident that taken place, that we can speak freely and not worry about whether or not compliance shows up or not. So we're truly there. And remember, anything you do with consultation training is free to you and to anyone in the public. So, globally harmonized system for hazard communication. Again, I'm Jessie Atencio, and I'm one of the assistant directors, but in my current role, I've assumed an acting director position while we're in transition from our director who has left. The other person that was facilitating some of this training in Yuma was Steve Weberman, who's an industrial hygienist with ADOSH, and his number, again, as you can see on the slide, can be reached at 602-542-1655. Steve is very diligent and responsive if you have any questions on the GHS system or how it relates to hazard communication, training dates, or whether or not there are applicabilities in some of the stuff that comes up. So either you can email me or you can email him with some more pointed questions if so necessary. So a little of the outline that we're going to go over. We'll talk about GHS as an overview. We'll talk about those changes to the hazard communication standard and also the effective dates. We're trying to do as much as we can at this level for many employers to help them understand that there are going to be certain days and dates that they're going to be tasked with to have training done, and also to be expected what to do as a whole when it's finished up for their whole program. So right now, not only the state-run OSHA programs or federal OSHA programs, we are all trying to accomplish the same thing by getting employees and also employers up to speed with the current revision. So a little introduction. The actual hazard communication standard got started in 1983. This would include a written program, a chemical inventory list, labeling that was inclusive of chemicals that you had in secondary containers, also MSDS sheets, and also employee training and information. Again, as we put at the bottom, we put 2015 major overhaul to the standard. And the reason why we say that is because you're going to find out as we go through this program that everybody has to understand on the different classifications, because they've been now defined to a little bit more of extent based on an ANSI standard. Also, you'll have to know that it's no longer MSDS sheets, what we're so familiar with. It's SDS sheets. That also those SDS sheets will have that 16-point format, and they'll all look alike. So gone are the days that when we look at a MSDS sheet that we're searching for the information as the chemical manufacturer show wants to put it. So if you're looking for health effects or safety, it'll always be in one certain section rather than in various areas. But if anybody is familiar with the Hazard Communication Center, which this is also a good point that we also make sure that the Hazard Communication Standard under 1910-1200 does have other applicabilities, that written program, inventory list, employee training information that would be incorporated into your GHS. So for those of you that are safety and health professionals, please ensure that you go back and make the necessary revisions to your own hazard communication program and still train as you normally would otherwise, because that has not changed. So, globally harmonized system of classifications and labeling of chemicals and safety data sheets. This basically came around the United Nations guidance for a uniform harmonized hazard communication system. It was initiated at the 1992 United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, UNCED. Based on major existing systems, USA and Canada systems for workplace consumers, and also pesticides. It was the European Union Directive as well for classification and labeling, and the United Nations Recommendation on Transportation of Dangerous Goods. So this is kind of an overview on how we got to where we're at now. So OSHA's rule. Major changes to the hazard communication program included changed hazard determination to hazard classification. Also changed MSDS to SDS. Changed definitions to comply with GHS. And then also labels for ship containers must have a GHS information label, which would be workplace labels by maybe GHS labels or other labels that identify the material hazards that are effective as the GHS labels. So at this point, I'm going to just briefly go into a couple questions that have been coming into our office on whether or not the employer can use the HIMS system or use the NFPA Diamond as a way of their global harmonization system. And that would be fine. There's actually some questions that are written into federal OSHA where they say that would be fine as long as all the information that the label requires and a new GHS system is there, then you're fine. And that would include, some way of a cautionary statement, a secondary precautionary statement, and so forth. And we'll get into that. But nonetheless, we don't want employers to not know that or feel that they have to change their whole system if they have an NFPA system in place that would meet it, or an HMIS system that would meet it as well. So also, safety data sheets now have 16 sections, which will include guidance for transportation information and environmental hazards. OSHA's rule continued. Other OSHA standards will be affected where applicable, and that's because it's incorporated by reference. New wording on warning signs for asbestos and other health hazards are a little bit of the examples. Affected standards include HAZWOPER, combustible and flammable liquids, welding, cutting, and brazing, chemical hygiene plan, and also permit required confined space entry, or just to name a few. So when you think about GHS, you think about GHS Purple Book. And this Purple Book can be looked for within the OSHA.gov website. Once you go into OSHA.gov, you can put in the search bar, you can put in GHS, or you can spell it out, Globally Harmonized System, within their search bar, and you'll get to this section where it talks about the GHS Purple Book. But the reason why it's important to understand, or if you need more clarification to have this book or to have this reference, is so that the harmonized criteria for classifying substances and mixtures is within there, according to their health, environmental, and physical hazards. The harmonized hazard communication elements, including requirements for labeling and safety data sheets. And we put down there at the bottom the actual website that you can find it at unis.org. But again, you can also find it at OSHA.gov, where there's a hyperlink to this location. So some of the justification that came over this was that label requirements require multiple labels for same product. Some of the hazard definitions are not consistent with toxicity and flammability, and then over 100 diverse hazard communication regulations for manufactured products globally. And that meaning that regulatory compliance is complex and costly. It's a barrier to international trade in chemicals. So the whole thing is that many companies or many manufacturers were having to send over different products with different labels per wherever they were going. So in an effort to try to minimize this or streamline this, that's the whole reason the GHS system came into play, which is, is something of a huge overhaul, but a needed item there as well for employee safety. So why is GHS important? We gave you a little slide just to kind of highlight this. You can definitely see that danger means one thing. You can see poison in South America means another thing, but in Africa it also means something else. So when you look at these crossbones, they were definitely used for different things and different meanings. So again, with that, the vision would be that all these places would have the same meaning for the same chemical that was shipped or used in the workplace environment for any employee or any employer. So, key guiding principles of the harmonization process would include protection will not be reduced. So, just because GHS has come into play now, it doesn't mean anything more. There's still protection for the employees and their process at whole. That safety and health is still there and nothing's gone away. I mean, you still have the same program. The hazard communication says you have to have a program, you have to have SDS sheets on site, you have to do some type of labeling, which is now the new label that they're requiring, which is 9 of them, one of them being environment, and also extended training for the employees and any type of chemical inventory list. That has not gone away, so protection will not be reduced. It will be based on intrinsic properties or hazards of the chemicals, and all types of chemicals will be covered. So hazard classification within the GHS, it's defined criteria used to assign a hazard classification, which now it's broken down. Physical hazards have 16 categories, and those health hazards have 10 categories. And of course, there's a couple of environmental hazards as well. But there's a little note at the bottom where it talks about mixtures, because in the GHS classification guidance for when chemicals are mixed for in-house use or when exported. So there's going to be situations where an employer may be mixing chemicals as they come in, and there may need to be another classification on there as to what their physical or health hazards are for that chemical. So it's going to be important for those processes that do any type of mixing of their chemicals in-house that they follow the appropriate, recognizing physical and health hazards that are associated with it, including their label. The hazard classification for GHS, again, this just breaks down physical hazards. There are 16 of them, and you can see them there. There's 16 physical hazards now defined, which are explosives, flammable gases, flammable aerosols, oxidizing gases, flammable liquids, self-reactive substances, pyrophoric liquids, self-heating substances, oxidizing liquids, and corrosive metals. So again, 16 points to this physical hazard. And then now you'll see the health hazards, which include acute toxicity, skin corrosion and irritation. You also got germ cell mutagenicity. You also have reproductive toxicology, target organs systemic toxicity, and also repeated exposure, and then aspiration toxicity. So hazardous to aquatic environment would be the environmental portion of this. So when you do environmental portion of it, whether or not it's acute aquatic toxicity or chronic aquatic toxicity. So, and the chronic just being the bioaccumulation of potential or rapid degradability. So regardless of what it is, environmental does have its own, but it's strictly for aquatic, whether it's acute or chronic. Labels, this is probably the biggest portion, and for this awareness training, this is going to be where employers are going to have to remember and give some training to the employees by that December 1st, 2013. But labels, so we're looking at symbols or hazard pictograms with red border examples. So many employers have asked already, hey, can we make our own? The standard doesn't say that you can't. So you definitely can make your own or print them out as you see necessary, but they have to follow the simple layout that we already have. In that fact is, or in that manner, would be the red borders with the black picture with the white background. And you'll see a little bit more. There's actually 9 symbols, which includes 1 environmental, and that's that environmental down in the bottom row in the middle where it talks about aquatic toxicity, and that's where you relate it whether it's acute or chronic. But you'll now see if you can see the actual examples that are out there. You're going to have a flame over a circle, which will be an oxidizer. You'll just have a flame for any type of flammables, pyrophorics, self-heating, emits flammable gas or self-reactives. You'll see an exploding bomb for explosives, self-reactives, organic peroxides. You'll see skull and crossbones, which will be acute toxicity that's severe, corrosion for any corrosives. You'll see a gas cylinder for gas under pressure. You'll see a health hazard one that talks about carcinogen, mutagenicity, reproductive toxicity, aspiration toxicity, and then you'll see the exclamation mark, which is an irritant, skin sensitizer, acute toxicity, any type of hazardous ozone layer. So these labels are out there. Employers can make them themselves. You will start to see these coming through by the manufacturers as they gear up. In some of my experience so far. I have not come across any new labels or any new symbols being put onto some of these chemicals, but after talking to some of my consultants and also compliance staff, they have seen this already implemented to some effect, to some degree. So the labels, what you really want to pay attention to is signal words, whether it's danger or warning. And then with that, after signal words, you have to have a hazard statement. So example would be toxic if swallowed, and then another precautionary would have to be a precautions identification, supplier, and supplemental. So on your GHS labels, these have to be there. There has to be some type of signal word, hazard statement, or other to identify what that label says. So on the flammability rating, this is something new that came back as far as rating the different types of class of flammables that you may have as far as your chemical goes. And the way it lists it out, it's either 1 equals extreme, so for a flammable class 1A, which would actually have the word danger by it. 2 would be for moderate, class 1B, would still cause a danger. But then as you see, as we go along a little further down the list, 3, which would be slight, that's a class 1C or combustible class 2. All you need is a warning symbol, warning word on there, a signal word. And then 4, which would be a combustible, that's a combination of a class 3A, which would just be a warning. And we put at the bottom, no rating for combustible class 3B or lower chemicals. So if you have these, this is a way that when you do your flammability rating or you identify a chemical, that you can actually understand which words have to be put where based on what they have. So here's an example of a label with the elements. So you'll see that in table 3, GS label elements of a flammable and combustible liquids. You'll see the symbol, which is category 1, which is that flame with the diamond, white background, it's black. And you'll see that the signal word will be danger, but the hazard statement for the category 1 will be extremely flammable, liquid and vapor. Category 2, which will still have danger, but highly flammable, liquid and vapor. Category 3, which would be the warning, flammable, liquid, and vapor. And then, of course, category 5, no symbol, warning, or combustible liquid. So, in a sense, this is just trying to highlight what we just described in the previous slide as far as 1, 2, 3, and 4. But this is going to be what your label is going to look like. So, NFPA 2 goes over flammability. Many employers already use this type of system. But 4 will rapidly or completely vaporize or normalize pressure, temperature. 3, liquids and solids that can be ignited under almost all ambient conditions. 2, must be moderately heated or exposed to relatively high temperature before ignition can occur. And then 1 must be preheated before ignition can occur. And then finally 0, materials that will not burn. So the reason why we wanted to incorporate this and show this within the slide is that this rating for the NFPA goes in reverse. So 4 being the worst down to 0. Whereas the new system, GHS, is based on 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 being the most severe. So that's kind of why we wanted to make sure that everybody knew about this, especially when you go forward and you're doing your labels. So some of the revisions of some of the standards that are out there, we did a page shot of what's out there. So the revision of the 29 CFR 1910-106, that's your flammable liquids. You can see that the way the classes are divvied up when you talk about the category. So flammable 1 is something that has a flash point of 23 or 73.4, or up to a boiling point of less than or equal to 35. Flammable class 1A, and then it goes 4 on. But you can actually all see all the way down to 4. So these have all been changed to kind of reflect what the GHS system is talking about. So here's an example of what employer can do. This is probably a little bit longer, but you can choose to use however you need to get your point across. So this is kind of just an example of a toxiflam, contains XYZ. There's the danger word. There's the toxic if swallowed, flammable liquid or vapor. You'll see the flame and you'll see the skull and crossbones. So do not eat, drink, or use tobacco when using this product. No smoking. Wear protective gloves and eye and face protection. And also we use only non-sparking tools, and also store in cool, well-ventilated area. And we also put, if swallowed, immediately call Poison Control Center. And then we also put down the information of the manufacturer who made this. So in the event something does happen or an incident happens, that proper personnel or those that are treating the individual can call and verify or figure out what they can do to for the onset of what's taking place. So here's another sample label that we put here. This is a product identifier. You see the code. You'll see a supplier identification card where it comes from the company, what's the address. There's your precautionary statements, which would include keep container tightly closed, store in cool, well-ventilated place that is locked, use only non-sparking tools. You'll see the next thing says in case of a fire, use dry chemical. We even put first aid on there. It says if exposed, call poison center. And then also the hazard pictograms with the signal word, danger, hazard statement, highly flammable, supplemental information like the directions for use, and then also the expiration dates and the lot number. So with that, we'll transition now into safety data sheets. Again, these are 16 headings on all safety data sheets from now on. So again, no more, with a couple of them that only have maybe 4 or 5 things on them, 7, 10, 15, whatever it may be. They have to have 16 headings. And these are similar to the ISO, EU, and ANSI MSDS, SDS requirements that are a little bit more stringent, of course. And then you can see our old format for MSDS sheets, that's the OSHA 174 1989, 8 sections, and they were non-mandatory. So manufacturer information, hazard ingredients that identified the information, physical chemicals, they had to have reactivity data, health hazard data, and control measures. So there was only 8, that were on there, and some of them were non-mandatory. And whereas the ANSI for the MSDS format or the SDS format for GHS, you can see that it's ANSI Z 400.1 2004 that they're using as a reference guide, and you'll see, it's 1 through 16. Now there's stuff on there as far as composition, information on ingredients, firefighting measures. You'll see first aid measures is always going to be on number 4. Handling storage will be on 7. Stability and reactivity is 10. You'll see transportation information, and then finally 16 will be other information. This goes over the federal effective completion dates. So the biggest one that most employers have to be ready for is December 1st, 2013. Employers must train employees on the new label elements and SDS format. June 1st is 2015. That's when the chemical manufacturers, importers, or distributors must comply with all modified provisions. So to put this in another way, employers have to train their employees on all the new label elements in the SDS format, and by 2015, chemical manufacturers will have to have their information ready to go for those operations or those chemicals they're going to be sending out. And with that, it's important to note too that by December 1st, 2015, distributors may ship products labeled by manufacturers under the old system until that date. So by December 1st, 2015, you may still see some stuff out there, but as we transition to it, you may not. And there's a little bullet point we put there that this date coincides with the European Union implementation date for classification of mixtures. So again, very timely. And then finally, June 1st, 2016, that's when employers must update alternate workplace labeling and hazard communication program as necessary, and provide additional employee training for newly identified physical or health hazards. Now remember, your physical and your health hazards have a little bit more information within them, and also again, if you're mixing chemicals, you're going to have to understand the difference or what you're creating so that you can have properly identified chemicals within your workplace. But again, June 1st, 2016, everybody, including manufacturers, employers, employees, shall be up to date with what's going on. So this transition period must comply with either 29 CFR 1910 1200, the final standard, or the current standard, or both for all chemical manufacturers, importers, distributors, and employers. The impact on safety and IH professionals, I can definitely say that this is going to be a challenge for some of your large organizations that have a lot of employees that they have to funnel through training where they use chemicals on a routine basis. If that is the case, you're just going to have to become familiar with the new system and what's required of it. And our other points would be that you should collect SDS sheets as provided by the suppliers and incorporate them into existing MSDS systems. or use commercial service. There are companies out there that provide, old school would be the MSDS sheets, databases, but these are SDSs that are going to be updated for your company to where the employees can call and get information on that SDS sheet as so needed if they choose to use an electronic system. But nonetheless, they have to start. It's a good example or a good practice to start collecting all these SDS sheets. Also, get new GHS labels for shipped containers. Employers can use other systems for workplace labeling that are effective as a GHS label. And this is kind of pointing out to what I talked about prior or previously in other slides, that if you are using NFPA or the HMIS system, you can still use that as long as the information is the same as the GHS labels. So if you can demonstrate that as an employer, you would be in compliance. So, and then finally, we train employees about new labels and SDS by December 1st, 2013. So the impact on chemical manufacturers and distributors, it's just them preparing and using new GHS compatible labels. They have to prepare and distribute new GHS compatible safety data sheets, and also commercial authorizing firms are ready and willing to help. So that's kind of what's going to be the biggest thing for them, preparing and using the new system, and also updating those SDS sheets for the employers. Commercial GHS services, these are commercial hazard communication and MSDS authorizing services should be ready for GHS systems. They're like anybody else in this new revision, in that they have to make sure that they're up to speed with the GHS system because it's required for all international trade. Just because OSHA is changing their information doesn't mean that in Europe, but they are. So and we also put preparing for domestic market because anywhere it ships is going to have to be all the same. So to help out a little bit, to show, because we do get questions all the time, why is OSHA changing this? Why is ADOSH, which is our state agency that runs our OSHA approved program, why are they changing all of a sudden? And why do we need to change? Well, to help out, we have a couple of letters that were publicized as far as their accolades or applauds for the new system. So this is the American Society of Safety Engineers, one of the oldest organizations for safety and health professionals, kind of giving their applaud to OSHA for its leadership in undertaking this rulemaking, and urges that every possible step to be taken to achieve a final rule as soon as practical. So, and you can read their final stuff within the slide as you need to, but just to show their commitment, that's why we brought it up. The AIHA's commitment, this is also another organization for industrial hygienists. They supported the proposed revision of HCS and believes it should result in a better hazard recognition and safer use of chemicals in the workplace overall. GHS is in the commercial news, so you already seen some letters, you already also seen some information that we're giving, but also it's important to know that OSHA is not just the only one pushing information out there, or other organizations that are dealing with safety and health, but there's also information out there on Industry Week. If you want to go to Industry Week, you can see that they have an actual paper that talks about how to convert to a globally harmonized system of chemical classification. If you want to go to EHS Today, they have a GHS publication that's called The Power of One. And then OH&S, Occupational Safety and Health magazine, talks about major GHS progress this year, global harmonization. They have a picture that's worth 1,000 words, talks about the GHS, and then their last item out was OSHA finally brings GHS to America. So some of the resources that you can get through, you can go onto the OSHA website and you can just bring up hazard communication. And when you bring up hazard communication, it'll give you their most searched or their most prominent links within their website. And you will see that there's an actual section for it, and global harmonization systems in there, with also some information why, the outcome, the need for it, and also some questions and answers. And then also, if you want to go to another place, EPA is another reputable source that you can go to. Department of Transportation. You can go to CSPC. You can go to the UN, or you can go to the Government Printing Office, which has a link to as well. Which we put in there that this site will be replaced with the federal digital system, which is that www.gpo.gov, or you can go to OSHA comments, which there was a docket on it. There was nearly 900 items on there, so feel free to go through all that information as you see fittingly, but we just want to make sure that the resources are provided to you so that if you need further information or further guidance or further for training purposes, to understand kind of how this all came up together, those are excellent resources. So with that, I'll take any questions. And if you have any questions after the completion of this webinar, you can definitely contact again ADOSH at any facility you want to. You can either contact the Phoenix office at 602-542-1769, or you can call the main line to Tucson office, which is area code 520-628-5478. And as I previously said before, we do have a toll-free number, and that number you can contact 1-855-268-5251. And if you need any more information, feel free to give us a call. Thank you very much for your time and your attendance.